really proud of, and what people may not realize at Glen Lake, we've been able to do that without adding additional personnel. So we are very mindful of our budget. We do have a healthy fund balance, but it doesn't mean that we go crazy, but we are able to offer some different opportunities. Our technology, we're moving to one-to-one computing. So it's hard for me because we have such a great system, and the way that we're able to integrate it, work together collaboratively with our staff, with our administration, to let the state mandates get us down, because we're going to keep working forward and making sure our kids are a focal point.
My name is Allison Modek, and I am representing Chris Parker at Northport Public School. One of our challenges that we face at Northport, being such a small school, is accommodating students and families who fall under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Act, and allowing them to be successful at school and want to be successful. I'm the liaison. Every district has one, and they serve students that are homeless, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they are living on the streets or all in shelters, but it means that they are living under situations that are not fixed, regular, or adequate. Many of our students at Northport live in a doubled up situation. That means there might be 2 to 3 families that are living under one roof, which in turn has the students have lack of sleep, eating, a quiet place to do homework. The list goes on. And we provide at our school breakfast and lunch and blessing in a backpack and after school programs, which really enforce getting work done and completed so that they are successful in their subject areas. But the lack of sleep is where we are finding the most challenging, and we can't really do anything. We can't go in and have parents put their kids to bed when there are 3 different kids sleeping in one bed, or if they're sleeping on the couch or on the floor and taking turns. So lack of sleep in turn causes poor work ethic on tests, standardized testing. They go down, they're tired, they can't focus, excuses, and kids being held back because they are not on grade level based on those test scores, because they are not getting sleep. I feel like it's not just in Northport, but it's happening all over Leelanau County as well. This could go into housing accommodations and different things like that, but I feel our biggest challenge is trying to get those kids to believe in themselves, to be successful, and to want to let us help them. So that's one thing that we are really facing, and getting that support from families and their parents and guardians. So that is one thing that we are facing in Northport.
Thank you. I think they deserve a round of applause. Now we'll open for questions. Over there.
Sounds like.
The microphone down to the gentleman. And just keep it at your chest level.
Is this good? It sounds like in part the issues are with the lack of students in the county, therefore not getting enough funding, and maybe part of that problem is because of the lack of affordable housing for families. But not being able to solve that problem immediately, it strikes me as with only 2,000 students in the whole county, why there are so many different school districts, so many superintendents, so many principals, so much duplication of things like payroll and the administrative stuff that you spoke about being a state mandate and a hardship. Why can't there be some sort of administrative consolidation to help solve your funding problem until the schools do get bigger?
That's a big one.
Glen Lake had an opportunity, and I'm not sure I would call it an opportunity, probably about 8 or 9 years ago, where we were in transition with superintendencies. And with our geographic location, at that time, our board and the Suttons Bay board decided to try to do a shared superintendency. And I can tell you, as an administrator that worked under that process, it was a nightmare. Anytime, because of where we're located logistically, the travel time from one building to another building, because we're kind of on the far end of it, to try to do shared superintendencies, we've looked at transportation. But when I have a community that my bus drivers pick up my preschoolers and they pick up my kindergartners at their door, they're walking them out, they know the students by name, they're able to support if there is an issue on that bus. I have a direct correlation to whom that bus driver will be, what their responsibilities are. They stop in at my office if there's an issue or a concern, and they're able to share that information. So sometimes when you're looking at whether or not we want to share some of the services, we have to look at the regional logistics as well as the quality of the service that we are able to attain and the personalized service for our families and our community and our kids. In our cafeteria, we're able to do scratch cooking, which in the long run has reduced the amount of our overall cost for what our kids and the quality of what our kids are receiving right now. So sometimes it's not just about what the bottom line is, but also the quality and the amount of service that you would like to see happen.
Anybody else want to address?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question because it addresses two things. Excuse me. One thing with that is that our administrations, there's 4 different unique communities inside here. So the 4 public schools, there's 4 unique communities. And over the last 30 years, they've tried lots of different models. One is sharing administration. They've tried on several occasions over the last 30 years to try to consolidate schools, which has not worked well. I think the one thing to think about is that the requirements put on each district is unique. Our administration, compared to other areas, is a pretty low percentage of what the costs are for running a school. Actually, it's quite a bit less than schools that would be in the middle of the state or southern part of the state. But the uniqueness of all 4 school districts, as Kim has suggested right there, it brings on it's a tough thing. Each community has not wanted to lose their identity, and it is a struggle. I don't think it's an end-all question. I don't think we're done with it, but we've tried on several occasions to do that, and it just doesn't work. Each school has their own debt. Each school has their own identity. So it's been a challenge.
And I'd like to say, if your school district is currently, which ours is, 185 or 187 square miles, we currently have kids who may be coming from Empire or almost halfway between Leland and Glen Lake, and they're on a bus for 45 minutes to an hour because you're covering actual distance. So if we start looking at the consolidations, like Jason said, there's always a study that comes back every few years. Are you going to have kids on a bus then for an hour and a half or more? So there is some real logistics behind just some of the financial components that you have to consider.
Great point. The one that we've looked at, so we've had transportation, things that we do share. We didn't talk about it. We talked a little bit about band right there, but we do share services with St. Mary's. You'll see on occasions, you'll see Suttons Bay, Northport, and Leland kids all going to the same cross-country meet, the same basketball game sometimes. We share our transportation. Career Tech Center, we look for those efficiencies at every opportunity. One problem with transportation in our county is that we got this beautiful lake that divides our county, and the only way to get from west to east is that little bridge over there. So it makes it a little bit of a challenge, and we've actually done studies, as Kim has said, and they wanted to know after the company did the study, how in the world do you transport your kids as efficiently as you do, because we couldn't do what you do. I think that speaks to our transportation directors that speak and get together on a regular basis to make sure that we are doing it as efficiently as possible.
Why don't we, Rob, one more response, and then we'll go to the next question.
There is an entity.
And could you hold the microphone more at chest level so
All
I
right.
don't get feedback? Thanks.
There is an entity in the region that is invented and designed to provide shared services to the schools in this region. It's the Intermediate School District that's supposed to be providing a lot of those shared administrative services, and they do. A lot of the special ed supports and the wonderful Career Tech Center that's available to the schools. I think if we're looking for more opportunity for more consolidation of services, that's a place that we can look harder.
Okay. Next question.
I noticed, Chris, you mentioned that there were things that you would like to do that you can't because you're in formula as compared to out of formula schools. I'm familiar with Northport because of its small population of students has eliminated so many things that I think would be valuable. What are some of the things you would like to be able to do that the out of formula schools do?
I think it's programming. It's like what the things that potentially, because of the size of Northport, they can't do because of the lack of students. If you are out of formula and you are of the size of Sutton's Bay, for instance, and again, I'll use Harbor Springs as an example because I spent 5 years there. We were able to offer opportunities in Harbor Springs that nobody else could because of that additional funding. So not only were we one of the top academic schools in the state is Harbor Springs, because of the funding, we were able to offer programs over and above, which really attracts students, and it actually enhances their education. So in Sutton's Bay, what we're trying to do with the limited funding that we have is offer all of these things that are over and above. One of the things that I've been recently working on is, there's 26 other states in the nation that require CPR certification before their students graduate from high school. With where we live, the number of students that we have in our school that don't even know how to swim, let alone know how to, perform CPR, and yet there's lakes all around them. One of the things that we would like to do is have a regular swimming and water safety and CPR program. But unless you get extremely creative, which we're trying, we're working with the Sutton's Bay Bingham Fire Department to actually, initiate this. But that's where that a little bit of additional funding can go a long ways. And so I've had the opportunity to work on two completely different ends of that spectrum, and so I can see how money can be frivolously spent, and how when you don't have the money, how you just wish you had a little bit of it because you could offer so much, to the students. And I think, with what we're doing in Sutton's Bay, is amazing with the amount of money that we have. We were $1.2 million in deficit a year and a half ago. Now we're out of deficit and we're actually able to offer tons of services to these students. But there's always more. You'd always like to do more as a school district for the kids because, as like Allison said, the number of students that we have, that when they go home, they don't necessarily get what we would consider a quality experience. The more we feel we can keep them in school and doing things under our roof and keep them out of trouble, then the better off that they are.
Okay, someone else?
In the Record Eagle today, there was a, in the Record Eagle today, there was a wonderful piece on the editorial page. And the fellow was describing what they're doing down in the Kalamazoo area, where they use the ISD to get a funding through probably a property tax or whatever that comes to the schools differently. And it seems to me that was the best thing I have seen in a long time. So I applaud your comment about trying to use the ISD, even though they love to hog their money. And that might be a way for some of the districts that are, like Sutton's Bay and Leelanau, that are really struggling to have that money. So I wonder if any of you are aware of that or talking about that.
I'll start since I have the mic. Yeah, downstate, the formula, see what they do, for instance, we have a career tech center. So what other ISDs do as a model sometimes, they'll have a vocational technology millage, or they have other millages that are district, ISD-wide. And then that money is then given back to the local district. So Charem, for instance, our neighbor ISD, has a similar model to that, where if you want to create a program within your district, then Charem will actually provide the funding for you to do that. Our ISD opts to go the career tech route, where we actually bus the students there and they provide the services there centrally, as opposed to divvy that money, out to the students. One of the things that just passed, I'm going to speak about the sinking fund a little bit. We've been lobbying for sinking fund money to be able to be used for a wider range of things for a long time. And that's something that's finally starting to happen, is we're now going to be able to use sinking fund money instead of just fixed assets within your facility. We're going to be able to use that for a little bit more stuff, because you still can't go out for an operational millage. And that's been one of the biggest gripes, is why can't we as a community just go out to our taxpayers and say, hey, will you support us as a school district through an operational millage? Well, you can't. So you have to do it through a sinking fund, or you have to do it through like a rec millage to be able to potentially do athletic fields and things of that nature. But I think that anything millage-wise that an ISD can do is great. It's just how the ISD opts to spend or not spend their money.
Question back there. Oh, Rob, you want to have another answer?
I'll just, since I brought up the issue of the ISD, I just want to continue that. There's a lot of talented people at the ISD, and the model, I think, is correct. The question is, are they providing the service? They work for the 15, 16 districts, throw a couple of our independents in there too, they work for us. Are they providing the services that those districts are demanding? And I think one of the challenges that they'll point to is that the local districts don't always speak the same priorities. And so there's a lot of them trying to figure out how do you serve one without serving the other. They want this, they want that. How can we be equitable? So that, from their point of view, that's their challenge. But I think as an educational community, as the local districts and the private schools can get together and start prioritizing how we think they should spend their money with one voice, then I think we'll get a better response from the ISD. I think they do wonderful work. There's wonderful occupational therapists and speech therapists, very, very talented people. The bureaucracy that's involved and try to sort that all out and making sure everybody's getting the services they deserve, that's an issue for the schools and the taxpayers to talk about with regards to the ISD.
All right, we have a question back here, and then up to Suzanne.
Hi, my name is Bill Robinson. I'm the president of the Leelanau School Board. I have a comment and then a question. My comment was just following up on your question about consolidating school services. And if you look very closely at budgets, you'd find out that the schools, there's not a lot of savings there.
Focus on administrative services.
Even on administrative services, if you looked at the budgets overall, there's not savings there. Most of the schools are very well run, very lean organizations that do, by the way, all of them, a great job of servicing kids, of educating kids. The needs, every one of them could use more staff in the classroom, and certainly administratively, not just for the comments that Kim made, but also for additional needs for kids. It's the primary job, it's a constitutional requirement to satisfy kids with a proper education, provide free public education. I think that we're falling down on that. My opinion is that I've done a lot of research about schools. I read a lot about what comes out of Lansing. I've attended numerous meetings from the governor's advisor on education, from state senators and state representatives who have invited House representatives to our school meetings on several occasions, and we've heard from them. And lately, I would summarize the attitude coming out of Lansing this way. These are not my opinions, but this is what I think is the attitude coming out of Lansing, and then I'll ask my question. And the attitude is that, one, that they're kind of looking at schools across the state and looking at it from as if they're flying over in an airplane, looking at every school district the same way. So with that attitude and perception, what we hear is that there are too many schools in the state, that they're not doing a good job, that teachers are problems, and that we need more charters. And it's something, you get these glib answers to very tough questions on how to educate kids, as we're required to do under the Constitution. It's compounded by the fact, partly, I would say mostly, by term limits, so there's a lack of knowledge about basic information in Lansing. Try to ask a new representative or state senator to explain Proposal A, or what in formula means. And it's an entire education process, and by the time they learn it, they're out of office. So that's becoming a bigger problem and a harder challenge for schools, I would add to this whole thing. Now my question is, that's my perception of what's happening in Lansing. Is it your perception in your dealings with legislators? And if it is, what do we do to change that attitude?
I believe our community, because if our community believes in our school systems and you see the positive things that you're doing, you are our best strength. And I don't say that lightly. Glen Lake has a huge amount of parent support that we could not run the programs that we run. I have parents who help with reading. I have grandparents who come in and help. But with all of the great things we're doing, as Bill mentioned, there's so much negativity about education and the quality of education our kids are receiving. Our job is to make sure the kids come first and to make sure that they're getting that quality programming. But you are our best voice. Our legislature, whichever branch you want to talk about, if we send them some kind of information, it's not looked upon or cared upon. If our families send the positive things that you're seeing in our classrooms or that you're reading about in the paper, or you talk to your grandchildren or your children, that is the best way that you can advocate for the great things that are happening. I agree with when one of the other representatives said that I get parents that come and they're shopping. And yes, we were at 30% school of choice. But with that being said, I'll say, you know what, there's some factors you need to consider. The range that you're going to be driving or working with your kids or bringing your kids in, because we want a community member that's going to be volunteering and supporting our programs. What about when your child starts doing the athletics or the sports or the drama or the music program? How far are you going to come to be able to do that? So I can't tell you how many times I say, you will not lose with any of the programs that you see within our community. So they have a lot of great choices. Legislatures don't know that. So it takes you speaking out and supporting the programs in our schools to make a difference. That's my personal opinion.
I think the point she hit on is being active. I go to Washington a couple times a year for Impact Day to advocate for that. We go to Lansing a couple times a year. The day before we went to Lansing this year, as we know, we've had some travesties. The Detroit Public School System's a travesty and the Flint Water System's a travesty. The day before I walked into Lansing, we were expecting to get $0 out of our state for public funding for schools. And magically, 24 hours later, there seems to be a couple $100 million on the table for public education. It's politics. There was not going to be a dollar going to schools up until the Flint crisis. There was a problem, our governor needed help, and he asked for it, and he got the dollars. That's politics. The only way we are going to change that education is our friend, and that's the only way our state's going to become sustainable, is to get out and do exactly what Rob just said, and that is vote. We need to have an educated population. Our kids need help, and until we get the dollars to support those programs like Chris talked about, it's going to be very hard to sustain a population. So there's a lot of politics that go in there, so we got to go out and vote.
I feel very blessed that I'm at independent school right now, because it is true, and Kim talked about it too. These mandates are consuming. So there's two sides of this funding problem. There's so many dollars that delivered, and then a large amount of resources that are consumed chasing the mandates and doing that could be eliminated. So if there's anything that I would like the public to know, is that a lot of the control that used to be in your local school board in terms of curriculum and how we're going to measure success and what qualifies us as being successful and what our challenges are, have been stripped away and now are centralized and standardized in Lansing in a one-size-fits-all manner. So if there's something you can advocate for, is to bring local control back to these brilliant people and your locally elected school boards to make those decisions for the community in which you live.
I'm actually curious about two things, and one is the philosophy of the very successful Finnish school system and how you think that would work in our school system. The other one is Common Core. I don't think that's a dead issue at this point, but also how you have addressed or not addressed that in your school system. I'll pick that one.
Suzanne, will you maybe summarize the Finnish in case?
Well, just having seen a movie that came through here, and that's as much as I can talk about, is that their children do not really get reading instruction in school until they're 7. That, I don't know if anyone else can add to that.
No homework.
They don't have homework, they don't test except perhaps whatever's learned that week. If any of you are familiar with that, you could speak to it. But we have grandchildren who are in a Common Core standard school system in Washington State, and they seem to be thriving. So I'm very curious about how that is being addressed at your school system.
I'll address Common Core, somebody will address
finish. I believe that regardless of whether it's called MEEP, MSTEP, whatever the assessment is, we do need some way of having a look at what our state curriculum is going to be. We are able to look at our state curriculum and then see how our kids are performing based on our most recent MSTEP test. Whether we like it or not, our kids are asked to be looking at things differently, think differently, process differently, and when you and I were in school, we would go in, we'd learn one way to do multiplication, and then we would learn one way to do division, and then we would then hopefully remember it for high school when we got to algebra, hopefully remember it when we got into any other types of formulation. And most of you will agree, how many could remember about algebra or how to do it to this day? It doesn't work. So the way that we are looking at doing it is asking students to learn based on their way of learning, some different ways of looking at learning a particular skill. I am amazed when I'm in our classrooms and the kids could come up with some of the answers that they come up with because there's no longer one way to look at solving that problem. That's what Common Core is about, is giving us different approaches for our kids to be able to answer those questions and then be able to find success in that, and also for it to be able to be in long-term memory so they can reproduce it in different settings. I know MSTEP and the way it was rolled out was not great. I know MSTEP has its challenges, but the state, for once, did listen, and they've modified a lot of those things for us to be able to use that assessment this year. We have to know, are we on target to be able to teach what we're being asked to teach? It does not necessarily drill down to some of the skills that we need to know in that child because it's not real quick turnaround time right now. And that they're working on and hopefully we'll get better at. We are able to use different assessments that actually look at the individual child and we get the results back within 24 hours or that same day. Those types of assessments help us know, are we delivering what that individual child needs? So I think you have to find that balance, and I'm not sure with the finished system, the one challenge I would say is if they're only giving assessments once a week, what type of assessments are those? Has a group come together to know that that's what that one system needs to teach, and is every teacher teaching the same thing? So when you start looking at curriculum and how we know if our kids are achieving, that's very, very broad in making sure that one, the child is the focus and the delivery system of that curriculum from the teacher to the child. And then once again, how is that teacher educated to be able to make sure they understand what Common Core is and then be able to teach that as well. So it's very multifaceted in how it's delivered and in that approach.
I would say that the problem with the Common Core isn't the standards that are being authored. They're fine. We've had standards for a long time, whether they've been state mandated or nationally produced, or whether it's the National Science Foundation or whatever. I mean, there's always, teachers need some kind of guidance as to, some language as to what we want students to do, so that's all fine. Where it breaks down is the idea that you can measure it with the test. I mean, that idea that you can measure this very complex, very individualized process. Well, we're not, by the way, we're not trying to standardize kids. I think our economy needs lots of talents. We need people who think that they can make a contribution with the skills that they have, and our job is to meet every one of them, make every one of their unique dreams come true, and not to make them all the same. So what happens is states adopt very simplistic measures to measure very complicated things, and they hang everything on a simple bar chart that can in no way measure what's happening in the schools. And that's really where it falls apart. So you mentioned Finland. Finland doesn't take this approach. There's an understanding that there's a developmental portion to the human being as well. You can't just say, to make them smarter, let's take the second grade curriculum and put it down to first grade. And the first grade curriculum, there's developmental things that are happening in the brain. There's a lot of brain chemistry and science that goes into education that has to be acknowledged. And by the way, if students don't love coming to school, it's going to be really, really hard to teach them anything. And so you have to enjoy, you have to find value in school, And that starts to get cemented the first day they walk into school, whether it's a pre-K classroom at age 3 or a kindergarten classroom at age 5. If they feel that they're objective 5, it's not an intrinsic process, they're going to reject school by 2nd grade. And good luck. Good luck getting your kid to enjoy high school and find meaning throughout that process that they don't think it's individualized and responding to